Welcome back to the Business Roundtable Podcast. My name is David Carr, your host. If you've been following along, we're over 100 episodes this year, getting all of our episodes in the last couple of years. Super excited to have a brand new guest with us, Davis Nguyen. Welcome to the podcast, Davis.
Thanks for having me, David.
Absolutely. Well, I want to have Davis on the podcast because we're going to dive into some key points in how you run your business, particularly if you're a coach or consultant. I think you're going to really benefit from this conversation with Davis today. In a world of a lot of complexity, confusion, we're trying to help grow our businesses, and that's where I have a passion of Steward Your Business. But when I met with Davis recently and I was on his podcast, his company, Purple Circle, we just had a great conversation. I said, Davis, you got to come on here, share with our listeners your journey as a business owner, entrepreneur, and helping others grow their business sustainably. So again, Davis, super glad to have you here. I love to have you share a little bit in your own words for those that haven't come across you. Davis has been around for quite a while. He's got quite a following, and if you haven't found him, you're going to be able to connect with him on LinkedIn. We'll probably both provide resources here at the end of the podcast. But I'd love, Davis, for you to share about your journey as a business owner and entrepreneur. What got you to where you're at now with Purple Circle?
Sure. So today, what I do is I buy and scale coaching businesses. But let's take a time back before I was buying businesses where I was helping owners sell their business or to remove them from the operations of it. And even before I had my own 7 or 8 figure coaching business, I get all the way back. In fact, I'm actually here for the week visiting my parents. So I'm back in my hometown. And so my family, we grew up in one of the poorest communities in America. So right by Atlanta airport. And growing up, there wasn't much hope. So the community I grew up in, most people don't think about college. It's not part of our vocabulary. It's more like, how do you survive? How do you get past high school and already do better than what your parents likely did? And so I grew up in a very similar environment where I became the first person in my family to actually complete high school and eventually be the first in my family to go to college and one of the first in my community to go to an Ivy League school. And I always had this goal when I was growing up that I wanted more than what I was having. It's like, for example, my waking up and losing electricity, losing power, that wasn't very fun to be able to do. So how do I create this better life for myself? And I remember the turning point in my life actually came when I was in 3rd grade. So actually one of the teachers who I'll be meeting with on this trip is she basically said, hey, what do you want to do when you're growing up? And I was like, well, at the time I'm in 3rd grade. So I was like, well, what am I supposed to know what I'm going to do? And so I said, hey, well, I just want to not be poor. And at the time, I remember being in 3rd grade, getting my clothes from Goodwill, and even having a pair of shoes that was just duct tape because we couldn't afford to get another Goodwill pair of shoes. And so from that, I was able to essentially build up this. I was like, well, can you do better in life? And I told her, hey, I want to not be poor. And she said, well, you got to go to a good college. And I asked her which one was the best college. And of course, she said Harvard. And that became the trajectory of what I wanted for the next until I was 18. It was, well, how do I get into Harvard? And that became my operating modem to go through. And eventually I would get into college. And from there, just eyes opened into what was possible there. And eventually, after college, ended up working in San Francisco, where I was a management consultant at Bain and Company. So I was advising these private equity firms, these hedge funds about how to make their next zero, right, in terms of their income. And so, but eventually the turning point of how I got into the coaching space and the consulting space was after my time at Bain, I was asked to join a company. And at the time, company is fantastic. They had this vision of making education accessible to people, even if you're not the type of person who's going to go to a Yale or a Princeton and whatnot. It's like, how do you make it accessible? But at the time, we hadn't figured out our lead generation. We hadn't figured out our sales mechanism. We hadn't figured out the operations yet. And so we were losing hundreds of thousands of dollars every single month. The only thing driving us was we had the owner's vision. And so eventually, though, we were turning around. I figured out, well, this is how we get leads. This is how we do our conversion process. And this is how we do our fulfillment. And so we end up having $100,000 losses to $1 million weeks. And of course, profit. And so that was like a transformation. But there was a time period in between where I needed to pay off a medical bill. It was like $21,000. And I didn't have the money at the time.
Right.
And this is before the company would hit their $1 million weeks. And of course, I would make my money from there. But I needed to figure out a way to make ends meet. And so that's where I started to become a coach. In the beginning, it was just a career coaching business. So just helping people with their resumes, cover letters, job interviews. It's something I was doing on Saturdays and Sundays. So it's all public information now. But that first year, I ended up making about $249,000, and I was just working Saturdays and Sundays. And so I thought to myself, well, if you can make $249,000 just working Saturdays and Sundays, what could I do if I did this full time? And so that's exactly what ended up happening. Was I ended up going full time in the following year. It's me, part-time coach, full-time assistant. We ended up hitting $1 million eventually that year. And it continued to grow from there to where the point where that original business, like career coaching business, runs on its own, has a leadership team. And along the way, I ended up having a bunch of friends who were executive coaches, leadership coaches, mindset coaches who reached out and said, "Hey, Davis, look, I don't need a $10 million business. I don't even need $1 million business, but how do I just increase my income to at least half a
Yeah.
million, whatever the goal was?" And so that was what ended up starting what I work on now, which is Purple Circles, because I had so much time on my hand. I was like, well, I can't guarantee you anything, David,
Right.
but I'll teach you everything I knew. And so this broke down to 3 phases of Purple Circle. So the first phase was, can this actually work? And so we ended up taking 4 people on from that first cohort. I'll share some summaries of it. Like one person ended up selling his business, made his $1 million that way, ended up basically spending his early 30s being able to explore his passions. One couple sold their business last year. They had grown their business from 100,000 to about 2.5 million, sold it for multiples of that, ended up having a delayed honeymoon. So that was pretty cool. Person took her money and took the profits of her money, made a down payment for her home and where she and her 5 kids live today. And one person continues to run his business. He's way over 4 million at this point, but at the time was like doing 100,000. And so that was pretty cool to be able to see that transformation, right? So that first group proved that it worked, but eventually it led to the second group of Purple Circle members, which was, well, we know it works, but how well can it work? So for the second group, for
Mhm.
example, we found one person at the time. He was executive coach doing $2,000 a month. Halfway through, he's doing 6 figures a year, and then by the end of the year, he's doing well over 1 million. And so you can kind of see that the process. The first group proved it worked. Second group was like, well, how well can it work? And eventually, the
Mhm.
third group proved that, well, can you do it without burnout? Because a lot of it was they were hardworking. But that third group, they were hardworking too, but they're like, well, hey, this coaching is part of what I do. This is my retirement. I'm not looking to scale to $6 million. Can I do it on a small scale? Short answer is yes. You're not going to get $6 million in a year doing that, but well, it's in the first year, anyways. But be able to make that process. And that's basically what led me to Purple Circle. And so today, short answer is that we help coaching businesses grow. The evil plan, of course, and I share this, is that at some point, if you do decide to sell the business, I hope you'll consider me as one of the buyers. No need to do that if you don't. There's nothing you sign when you join Purple Circle that says you have to sell to me or even sell at all. But it's one of the services that we offer.
No, I think that's great, and you covered a lot there. I want to look forward to unpacking this a bit, Davis. Is the ability that you have become when I wanted to have you on the podcast is that you're stewarding your time, your resources well. You said, hey, look, I'm successful here. How do I take what I did? And I love your mission of helping with Purple Circle. You reach all these businesses and individuals and help them, and that's shared passion, right? How do we help liberate people, get them in a much healthier, better place of being, and not out of deficit? And so one of the things you mentioned was the point of getting clear, and that's one thing I want to resonate, and maybe we can unpack this a little bit about, before we even get to the burnout side. But first of all, like, you and I believe that complexity kills that momentum. I know that from my experience. Like, if it gums things down. So one of the things I teach leaders is, confusion is expensive and clarity drives performance. So talk a little bit. This is definitely what I hear, part of the DNA of Purple Circle. And how would you define clarity that's helped businesses scale, particularly in the coaching business, Davis?
So I'd say it comes down to 3 things. I'm a huge fan of simplicity because
Hmm.
simplicity scales, fancy fails, is what we say. So when you think about it, is I noticed this too, because we get to work with coaches who are new, who
Hmm.
are trying to make their first dollar, go to their first $100,000 year. Coaches who
Hmm.
are making $100,000 years go to their $100,000 months, and then coaches who are making $100,000 months go to their $100,000 weeks and beyond. And the thing I see is that fundamentally it goes down to how complex is your business, as in
Hmm.
it doesn't need to be complex at all. And for most coaching businesses, if it is complex and you're not at a large scale, sometimes I always think, is there someone who has a simpler business doing better than you? If so, then they prove to have it can be there. And so
Hmm.
when I think about the work that we do, the secret is this, which is we think about what's the one big thing. Like we call it the OBT, but what's like the one big thing that if you do this, everything else becomes easier. And so I'll share with you a story of this to illustrate this. Is that I am huge into workouts, and one of the movements I love is the deadlift. So deadlift is basically just lifting the bar off from the ground. And a
Hmm.
lot of times people think, okay, well, how do I get stronger with the deadlifts? For example, let's imagine that your back can carry 100 kilograms, but your arms can only hold 80 kilograms. Well, you're always going to be limited by how strong your grip is, that 80
Yes.
kilograms, right? You can make your back go from 100 to 180, but your grip's going to destroy anything you have. So you always want to work out what's the weakest link. And so how this translates is that I often see a lot of coaches, they're focusing on what either they enjoy doing, they know well, or 3 they think is important, but it's actually the constraint. So I'll show you a story, which is this is a Purple Circle member. When they first started, they were doing about $5,000 a month, and within 3 months, they were doing $70,000 a month. And I'll tell you the secret of it, which is that the person, amazing coach, and also an amazing marketer. So to him, he was like always having a wait list about people going through. But here was the catch: out of every 100 sales calls that booked with him to talk to him, he only
Mm-hmm.
converted 3 people, 3 out of 100, so 3% conversion rate. And
Mm-hmm.
so I joked with him, you're better off selling cello panels in Antarctica. And so the thing was that he always tried to fix that by either becoming a better coach by having better delivery or doing
Uh-huh.
better marketing, because that's what he knew. But the constraint was, well, your sales suck. And so let's figure out a sales process, let's filter it out, let's go through. And eventually all we needed to do was be able to increase that, right? And so from 3% to the average of 30%, that's already a 10x increase, right? So going from
Oh
5,000
yeah.
a month to $50,000 a month, and then a 70,000 combination of other few things. But you kind of see that how one item, if you work on it well, unlocks everything else for you. So
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
demonstrate this because a lot of people, they focus on the wrong thing. If, for example, you are a great coach, but you don't have enough leads coming into you, but you
Mm-hmm.
try to figure out how to make your coaching better, well, you're not solving the problem, which is you need more clients. But
Right.
oftentimes, though, you could be an amazing marketer, an amazing salesperson, but you're not retaining your clients long enough. Well, you have a coaching retention problem. Probably should fix
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, that's super important. And I think, we all have these blind spots, and that's why it's helpful to have somebody like you, Davis, or myself come in and say, look, look at things and say, I didn't even see I was missing that. I didn't even see how I was behaving or approaching it that way. And I do, to your point, Davis, whether you're a coach or not, I've seen this other businesses say, well, this service isn't working, or I don't think it's working. Let me add another service, and now you've got multiple complexities, right, of delivery and messaging, and now it's made it much harder. Even, I mean, again, not even just a small. I've seen this at bigger companies too, where they try to add this on, and they've not got, to your point, Davis, the clarity of what really needs to be unlocked, and they're just making it harder on themselves, if you will. And then ultimately, I mean, unfortunately, it can lead to the demise of the business. I mean, most businesses don't make it. That's the reality.
Correct. On it is, especially the way I always phrase it is that, so someone told me this and I never forgot it, which is that you could be an amazing coach, you could be an amazing consultant, but think about it: when you work with your clients, you tell them their blind spots. It's the same thing with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is I always joke, it's like we have the noses, but we still need someone to tell us that we have bad breath.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you can't tell. And I think, that having that, and I think, Davis, one thing you said too, your background coming from, having an understanding of, buying or selling a business, I think is really unique. Not everybody has that perspective. I talk with folks in that space, mergers, acquisitions, and, and private equity, and they're looking at the things like you're saying, Davis. They're looking at these components of the business because that's how valuable the business is. If it doesn't have systems and processes, if it's not clear on its messaging, if all of these things, the sales system's broken, right, Davis? It's not really that valuable. I think people don't realize, in their mind, they think it's more valuable. Oftentimes, I found that they believe their company is more valuable than it really is, and somebody like you, Davis, can look at it and say, I'm seeing breakdowns here, right?
Exactly. Is depends on what your goal is on it. If your goal is eventually to sell the business, the buyer needs to know that you have all the systems and processes in place. Because, for example, David, if you sell your business and all of a sudden they don't get David, and David's the one holding all the strings together, well, you didn't really buy anything here.
Yeah.
And so that's the extreme of it. But even if you don't buy a business, at some point you want to be able to take breaks, take
Yeah.
vacations, spend time with people, and not worry that the business is going to crumble apart. So that's where the systems and processes need to come in. And it doesn't have to be complicated for a coaching business. It actually doesn't. It's not like we're trying to run a nuclear power plant. It's just ways to do it.
Right. Well, so if we get clear, if we have a better, we're understanding of where we're at, then what happens is, hopefully that's clear, but you've got that understanding. Now what I found is, okay, even if they're clear, sometimes they still try to do everything. And I think recognizing, I've been this in myself, I've seen this in other companies and business owners, they try, even though they're really good at business, but they have trouble letting go. And then there's this burnout phase where they feel like they gotta do everything, or they got to touch everything. And speak, if you wouldn't, me, Davis, you've done this, you've built multi-million-dollar companies of and you said, I could step away. Now I could, speak to that kind of mindset, understanding of you chose to, I can step away. I don't have to be there every day. And when there's I don't know, that shift in your space, I mean, you came to it quickly, but I feel like some business owners, they're slower to accept that Like, I've got to be involved. I've got to have my hands on everything, you know?
Yeah, so you gotta think about like what is your goal? Like what is your role or responsibility? For example, if you're a business owner, you're trying to build a business that can run without you. If you're just trying to be a coach, then obviously you're just gonna be a coach, and that's totally nothing wrong with that. If you just want to be a coach forever and take on how many you can, people do that. That's one
Hmm.
aspect. But if you're trying to own a business that can operate without you, where you can go to sleep and it actually runs and so forth. So the way I think about it is that think about going to an Apple store. Tim Cook is not in there opening the door and closing every single location every single day. And so that's the aspect of it. Is like, how do you do that? You could choose to still be involved in the business in other ways. So the way that I think about this is that I think about a coaching business in 4 phases. There's phase one, which is what I call the pioneer. Pioneer is you wake up, you push the wagon moves. But if you decide, hey, you know what, I'm gonna take a day off, the wagon does not move, nothing happens. You're like the solopreneur. So that's level
Hmm.
one. But eventually, you want to be able to evolve at least to a level two, which is a pacer. So a pacer is you have some systems, some processes in place, and here you can step away. As in, it doesn't mean that you can step away every day for the rest of your life. You still have to come back in, but at least you know that okay, you know what, I know that clients will be taken care of. I know that I have a lead gen person going in, and you can set that pace, right? That's level two.
Hmm.
Then you move into level three, which is what I call the pilot. And David, this is what you alluded to, is that oftentimes we started our business because there's something that we just love and other parts that we don't love. For example, is it the
Hmm.
coaching? Is it being the visionary? Is it creating the content? What is it? So the pilot allows you to step into that role, like similar to a United pilot or a Delta, pick your favorite airline,
Hmm.
is you want to step onto airplane, but you don't want to think that, oh, wait, why is the pilot serving me my water? Why is he emptying my cargo bags here? Right. It's like, I want the
Yes.
pilot to do the one thing they do well and everything else is served by someone else. So that's the
Hmm.
pilot. And eventually you go through each of the phases. So you start from the pioneer while you're doing everything else. You go to the pacer where you're setting the pace of the business. Does it go fast? Does it go slow? Eventually you go into level three, which is the pilot. You get to choose what you work on. And level four, if you decide, is the passenger. So this is like Richard Branson steps on version and says, all right, you know what? I want to go to Nectar Island. Take me there. Right. He doesn't have to worry about every single aspect of it, but he can choose. Like if he wants to step in and be involved, he could, but he doesn't need to. And so
Right.
that's the levels I want to. And not every coach, not every business owner wants to get to level four, but at least define your vision of where you want to be. I haven't found anyone who wants to be on level one. Usually people want at least to get to level two, but level two, three, or four, where do you want to be?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And I think, again, having somebody like yourself, Davis, or a coach, somebody that's looking at these things, asking you these questions, you're going to go be much healthier and go further and do it sustainably. And I think that's so important because if you're not aware of this, I think some people maybe they somewhat are aware, but they realize they need somebody to like just kind of reflect back, like
Sure.
to your point, is that your goal? Is that really where you want to be? And you're like, no, not really. Okay, well then we have to shift our focus and I think someone like you, Davis, helps unlock folks to then say, okay, where what is it that you want to be? Get clarity, and so that you're not burning out. Because I feel like if you have and I'd love your thoughts of it, but if you have a compelling vision about where you want to go, then you're like, okay, that's the vision. It's out there, but I'm gonna adjust how I need to get there because it's just burning inside of me, and I want to get there. And I want to get stuck in my own way.
Yeah, exactly. It's very clear about where the roadmap has to be. So I always talk to people this too. Is like I learned this when I was a kid. So when I was playing video games, I would often get stuck at a level, and I knew that you can get past that level. So there's a couple things you do. You can either grind it out, play a couple more days, weeks, months, whatever it is, and get to the next level, or you just find someone who's been there and can just show you the ropes how to get there. It's just a lot easier, right? To
Right.
be able to do that. And same thing with my business. I can't credit myself for having created everything myself, as in I had to figure out and basically get coaching, get mentoring, get consultants at every single level that I've been at. Like, for example, when I first hired my first general manager, I was like, well, I want to make sure that I compensate them well, give them responsibilities, so I can step away from the business, that transition plan. I haven't like had some big ideas about how to do it, but it was like, well, what if I just hire other people? Like, even if they were $1,000 an hour, or 1,500,
Hmm.
$2,000 an hour, whatever, they've done it. I want to learn
Hmm.
from their playbooks. Like, well,
Yep.
condense me 10 years of learning into just a few hours. And that has been my motives in terms of being able to figure everything out. So when I went from the neighborhood where people don't go to college to all of a sudden going to Yale and Harvard, the secret was, well, I couldn't afford college counseling at the time. But what I ended up doing is just code emailing students who were at Harvard and Yale, trying to learn about how did you get in. And once I
Yeah.
was at Yale and Harvard, I was like, well, I want to work at Bain and Company. I want to work at the McKinseys. And even though they only take one out of every 60,000 applicants or whatnot, like 1% of the applicants, I was like, well, I want to learn how to do that. And so I reached
Hmm.
out to the consultants who were there. And so it's like every step of the way, it's like didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Like I said, we're not building nuclear power plants, but even if you were building a nuclear power plant, you're probably not start from scratch. You're
Right.
probably find other people who have built out nuclear power plants. So it's the same thing when we talk about coaching, consulting, and a lot of people who are here listening to the episode. It's like, well, we got to take our own medicine, right? It's like, just imagine going to a doctor who doesn't believe in medicine.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's why we have the Business Roundtable podcast. We want voices like yours out there, Davis. It's like, hey, come, learn, listen. And if you're like, oh my gosh, there's value here and I'm getting unlocked and I'm getting help, come check it out. I mean, so for those of you that, I mentioned earlier, I'm connected with Davis on LinkedIn, and you guys will put Purple Circle and the links there so you guys can go check out the community, learn more. It's been a great resource for me, and I'm was really glad to be on the podcast as well, because again, don't go it alone. And what I love about what you're doing, Davis, is you're helping business owners, and they realize, okay, like I said, what would this investment, and I think you did this with me, a calculator of time, like how much time is it taking you to do this, and like how about if we could change and channel that time into something more productive and having somebody else come in there. And that's what I love Steward Your Business, is like, how do I integrate the team into your vision? And having you on the podcast, Davis, is you're unlocking them, saying, okay, here's the real focus. Let's get your rest of your team in place so that you can do what's the most impactful, right?
Correct.
Yeah. What would you say, once we get that part kind of, so we were like, okay, like you said, we're moving toward, not everybody, but many of us want to move to that passenger role. But in order to do that, it requires, the power of what I say, frameworks and systems. And I think what I loved about your Purple Circle framework, if you will, Davis, was this is a simple, we talked about earlier, simple, clarifying way of where is the breakdown. We all have these different things, and it happens, over the business life cycle. You might have one dialed in it right now, but then that could break down depending on what other, pressure. There's always kind of what do they say? The weak point in the chain. There's always something that kind of gives and it shifts to one thing, and then we fix that, and then another part has to adjust. So talk a little bit, if you would, about, how you've created, you've had My Consulting Offer, you have this career coaching, like scaling blueprint, if you will. If you wouldn't mind just kind of walking us through that, Davis.
Yeah, happy to share that, actually.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's listening to this on the audio version, this is another reason for you to check out David's YouTube and check out the videos. But yeah, let me pull this up for you. Happy to share the framework. So I'll give you a backdrop of it, which is, this is the framework I wish I had when I was building my business. And it's the same framework I use when I think about buying a coaching business, or I think about scaling a coaching business. And it's the same one where I'm actually consulting with 2 coaching businesses that are doing about $100 million each. And this is the same framework we institute with them as well. And so let me actually share my screen here.
You may need to, let's see, we'll make sure that you can access it. If you have a trouble, we'll see if I can move it around here for you, Davis.
No worries. All right. No worries. Here, let's do this. I think what we'll need to be able to do is, all right, since this is on StreamYard, we might need to be able to do 2 other steps here.
Oops, here we go. If you have the file, I can pull it up, or the Purple Circle itself.
Yeah, how about that? Let's say, instead of drawing it, let me just do this. Let me actually do this for you. Right.
And while Davis is pulling that up, we are on YouTube, so you guys can always click up our YouTube videos. Of course, we appreciate you guys subscribing on it, whatever the podcast platform you like. We're on all of them pretty much. And if you don't find me on one, let me know. If you look up David Carr or the Business Roundtable Podcast, I'm happy to have you guys subscribe. Leave comments too as you guys are listening to this. If you have a specific comment, put it into the with the feed wherever you find us, whether it's LinkedIn, Spotify, Amazon Music, whatever the case might be. Leave a review and share your comment with thoughts, feedback. We welcome it. And it doesn't always have to be positive. We just want it to be constructive, I should say. So constructive feedback is always helpful and welcomed. And Davis, I don't know if you have trouble pulling it up, because I know we use the platform StreamYard, which is a lot of fun, but sometimes there's little technical fun things we have to work around.
It's all good on that one. So worst case scenario, what I'll do is I'll just do the PowerPoint version, or actually, what I can do here is, all right, we're gonna do a workaround. It's always all about entrepreneurship. So let's do
there we go.
Here.
See, we're doing it in real time, so we're collaborating. So you guys get to see this is what it's like to work with a true professional. It's like, hey, you know what? How can we work together on this? And I love it.
Here, I'm gonna go ahead and do something Neat. This will come at is I'm going to share my screen on. So usually on Zoom, you can just go ahead and just share an iPad, but obviously I just saw that there's no iPad connectivity. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go ahead and
And I think
perfect.
if while you're doing that, I think I have the actual purple circle too. I'm gonna see if I've got it here. I'm gonna see if I can pull that up as
No,
well.
all good. I got it.
You got it.
Then great. I got it. I'm going to share my screen here and go ahead and share screen. Sounds good. All right, let's go share a window here. Let's share it. All right, great. All right, so you should be able to see my screen now, which
There
is
we
the
go.
iPad.
Yeah.
So whenever I think about evaluating a coaching business, a consulting business, let's work there, is I think about three things. So I am a coach, not an artist, so you will excuse the handwriting here. And so whenever I think about a coaching business, there's really three things I look for. First off is when I buy them is do they have consistent leads? If they don't have consistent leads, you don't have revenue coming in, right? Second is do you have consistent sales? The reason why is that you can have all the leads coming in, but if you can't convert them, similar to what I mentioned about the coach who was doing 5,000, what the unlock for him doing 50,000 a month and beyond was just being able to have consistent sales. And then finally, you need to be able to deliver on the sales, which is the consistent results. Otherwise, people will leave bad reviews. Now, let's talk about what happens. A lot of coaches, they have one, maybe two of these, but they don't have all three. Let's talk about what happens when you're missing a crucial component. Let's imagine you're an amazing marketer and you're amazing at sales. People come to you, you have a Midas touch, they become clients, but you don't have the results to back it up. Like people fall through the cracks and you're trying to be the center of everything. Well, at least the two things. First off, it leads to a bad brand. So people will speak poorly of you, right? Bad brand. And the second thing it leads to is burnout because you're trying to juggle everything at once. So you want to avoid that, right? Now, that's the first part. Now, the second part of it is if you have consistent leads and consistent results, but you don't have consistent sales, you run into cash flow issues, which is some months you are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be rich. Other months you're like, wow, how do I pay myself?
Right.
You want to avoid that. And you could be an amazing salesperson, an amazing coach, amazing operator, but you don't have leads coming in. You basically have low revenue because not enough people know about you. So ultimately, what you want to do is be in this purple circle in the middle, right? You have consistent leads, consistent sales, and consistent results. So now, how do you actually get that? I'm actually going to unpack this one level further and walk you through how to think about each of these levels. So whenever you're thinking about consistent leads, and this will work with you no matter again, if you're trying to go to your first 100,000, your first $100,000 month, your first $100,000 week, is first off, you need to be very clear on your offer promise. Who do you serve and what do you serve? So a lot of times I find that coaches, they try to be everything to everyone.
Oh yeah.
And that's basically trying to be a buffet. Like some people just want sushi, but you're trying to be a buffet that happens to serve sushi, right? So that slows you down. So in order to push more, you just need to be able to figure out who you deliver and what's the outcome that you're delivering to. Second is you need to have your one channel. And so a lot of coaches I find are trying to be on 5, 6, 7 different channels, but really all they need to do is be on one channel and to be on that channel consistently. Whether that's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook ads, whatever it is, just be consistent on it. There are businesses I work with, they're doing like 80 million and they pretty much have one primary marketing channel on it. But for most businesses, I find that you can get to 1.7 million without even touching a second channel. Like you can do 1 million LinkedIn, 1.7 million on Instagram, whatever it is, you can do that.
Yes.
And once you have that process, once you have that channel dialed in, you need to be able to have the marketing process behind it. Otherwise, you're just basically wishing for luck or you're trying to burn yourself out. So think about, can you step away and the marketing engine continues to work? Now, those are the first three things I work for. But if you have that, the offer promise, the one channel, and the marketing process, you're going to get consistent leads. Now, from consistent leads, you're able to get to consistent sales. So what happens now is you should be able to generate so many leads that you have a wait list and people who want to work with you, talk to you about your services. And so the next thing that breaks down is you need to have a pre-sales process. This is like a qualification. So a lot of coaches, once we unlock their consistent leads, they run into this problem where they're having so many people reach out to them, but not everyone's qualified.
Sure.
And so you need to be able to qualify people, the type of people you want to work with, they have the budget, and they have their desire what you're offering them. So let's imagine that's all true. So the people who show up, and then coaches, you can relate to this, is if you ever talk to someone who drags on the conversation, you know that they're never going to join you. They don't believe in investing in themselves, and they don't even want what you offer. Terrible waste of time. And once you have that pre-sales process, we then move into the sales process. The sales process is making sure that you have a clear, defined sales process so that you're not reinventing the wheel every single day. Because if you're reinventing the wheel every single day, what ends up happening is that you're going to end up struggling find a scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you have that sales process, you need to be able to have the capacity to be able to take on the sales calls and to be able to serve the clients that you're onboarding. Because if you don't have any of those, you don't have a business. You're just constrained by yourself. So we talked about that,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
So the
absolutely.
test I always think is that, well, the test I always think about is that if you lose your voice tomorrow, could someone else take over for you temporarily even?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is no, you don't have the capacity.
Yeah.
But let's imagine right now you did all first six, you have consistent leads and consistent sales. You need to be able to deliver on the back end. And delivering on the back end looks like this. There's three things. First off is the delivery. Right now, if you're at the center of your delivery, like the delivery doesn't happen without you, then you don't really have a business. You just have a job that people pay you and hopefully pay you a
Mm-hmm.
lot for. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
you need to be able to move yourself to delivery. But outside of delivery, you also need the systems. And of course, you talk about this, David, on your
Yep.
podcast here, is you need to have the systems and processes in the back end to make sure that everything gets cut. You have someone doing your payroll, so you're paying everyone on time. You have someone who's collecting the invoices from clients, the
Mm-hmm.
payments, all the way to, hey, I know exactly how to track my leads and my sales. So the systems behind it. And finally, most importantly, you need a scale plan. If you're planning to grow your business, it's knowing exactly what you need to work on, when to work on it, and how to work on it. If you don't do that, you're just spinning your wheels and you see other people growing, you know you're capable of growing, but yet you're struggling. And so this is how I think about it too. And this is self-assessment. So if anyone wants to go through the self-assessment, you can just go through our website. It'll allow you to walk through this and you can do this exercise to see where you're at in your business. It'll allow you to figure out the bottleneck. For example, if you have consistent leads and consistent results, but you're just not getting consistent sales, well, work on your consistent sales and work on, is it the pre-sales process? Is it the sales process? Or is it the lack of capacity to be able to keep up?
Yeah, I love it, you guys. So those of you are, I'm going to bring us back here. But those of you that are not watching the video, you can still obviously take notes, come back. There's a lot in there that David just broke down. But I really feel like the simplification, Davis, of, okay, obviously there's nuance in those things that you talked about, but the overall simplification, understanding this and where we need to focus in, it really goes to, leading our businesses well, leading ourselves well, and focusing on those things. And again, I appreciate you presenting that, Davis. And I think really this speaks to what I love, again, your mission at Purple Circle is to really transform. I love this, 1 billion lives. That's a goal. That's that's putting it out there. And I love that, to empower coaches that we can make this lasting impact and get out of our own way. Because I feel like there's a lot of folks that, that really want to help folks. They really call, they want to help them, and they're in their own way. And so, seeing, Davis, what you've been able to do, what I call this, I love it. I call it like a ripple effect, if you will, that you're creating this space where coaches grow and their clients can thrive. And it's not just stuck only on me. Yes, I have the idea, I have the vision, but it's like leading myself well so I can be in the right place at the right time. I think that is a fantastic tool that you've presented to us today.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. I know we're getting to the end of the podcast, and I would love to go longer with you, Davis, but I know our time is short. You just covered a whole lot of different things. If I'm coming into this, maybe you can speak to this in a couple of different ways. If they're a new coach, maybe they've been around for a little while, they're getting stuck, or maybe they're where would you suggest to them to start? Like, hey, you're not getting the results that you want because obviously you're stressed, you're burned out, you're not seeing the results, like you said, those different areas, whether it be cash flow or they're not getting consistent leads, right? Or you're getting, that scalability isn't there. What would you suggest to somebody as they're listening to this podcast, as they walk away, they're listening to it today, Davis, that they should take action on?
So the two things I have found have always been a proven point where I feel like either the first thing I always think about is like, do you actually want to change? So the question I
Mm,
always ask people too is that, how do you feel about the quality of your income, the quality of your life, and the quality of the type of clients you're working with? If the answer is I wouldn't change a single thing at all, just keep doing what you're doing. And then you
yeah.
don't need to change anything, right? But if you do believe that you're capable of more income, you're capable of having more or better clients, and you're capable of having more time freedom, and have a think out, well, who's done the thing that you want to be able to do? Have a conversation with them and figure out, because
Mm-hmm.
if they have cracked it, it's not impossible for you to do the same thing. It's just finding those people and just having that conversation. And from there, you'll see what the future looks like. And it's not only to me probably the biggest hack that I've had in, again, just my whole journey, is that success leaves clues. Is that you can try to
Mhm.
find and figure out all of this alone, but better yet, just talk to someone.
I love that, Davis, and I love that you've created a community with Purple Circle. So, I found power in communities through different, folks that I've been a part of, and I 100% agree, Davis, is like find a community, find a tribe that you can be a part of that you'll go further together, and you're not isolated, you're not alone. I love hearing the successes that you've shared earlier in the podcast of folks that have come in the different cohorts, because Davis, I'm sure they weren't, they weren't just going in there alone. You created, not only they work in the frameworks and systems, that you have them in together talking with each other, right?
Correct. So
Yeah.
community is a huge aspect of it. To me, it's more like two things. Is I'll tell you what the importance of community in general, whether it's Purple Circle or anyone else, is I always believe that if you can find a community in places where there are people doing the things that you want to do, you gravitate naturally towards it. So when I was starting my first business, when I was starting my consulting offer, the first career coaching business, I was like, well, I was in rooms where I was hanging out with people who were doing $100,000 years as coaches. And I was like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it too. Of course, I blasted past that. And I was like, well, if they can do it, why would I hang out with people who are doing $1 million a year? It's like, well, same thing. All right. Well, 10 million. It's just the same aspect of it. Is like your vision of it always changes. So for example, one of the groups I'm in right now, not that I want a private jet, but he's just like, oh yeah, I'm just casually flying around his private jet. And I'm like, oh wow. Okay. That level's possible too.
Yeah, absolutely. The possibility is there. And Davis, I just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast here. If you guys got any, value, which I got a ton out of here, just hearing it again, the Purple Circle and my other things, I would really encourage you to reach out to Davis. Go to joinpurplecircle.com, check it out. And any other notes, we'll make sure we put it in the show notes so you guys can follow up. Davis, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Absolutely. Of course, again, like I said earlier on the podcast, you guys, we love it when you like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Welcome your reviews as well. And just encourage you to steward yourself well, steward your business well, keep that vision alive, and come back into the next episode of the Business Roundtable Podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening.